We are live. Well, thank you for watching. There's no one watching right now. I didn't warn anyone that I'm about to do this. But here we are. So I've got some new equipment, trying to play around. If you can't hear me well, please let me know. And I've been doing more recordings. I've been doing more. I did a few podcast episodes from Ars Politica. I'm going to be doing that more. Probably like short commentary. You just got to get back into doing some of that. I'm going to be doing some videos. I'm trying to set up my studio. I was going actually had to delay my construction of my office. I was going to build an office, but I got busy building a deck, and I'm still working on that. And I have a few things coming up, so I'm going to try turning this into a quasi, place to do some video recordings. But so it is welcome. It is Lone Bulwark Day. So I've been receiving a lot of support for that old tweet of mine, an old tweet from 1 year ago. Celebration of 1 year ago, the Lone Bulwark tweet. And here we are. And it's still as true as when I said it. I feel like things have changed significantly. It's hard to know. Sometimes you're in this little internet bubble occasionally, so you don't know exactly what the world is like out there. But it does seem that things have changed. And people are seeing or noticing what was left unnoticed in the past, and we are making progress. So yeah, one day, or been 1 year. So I'm here. I'm going to answer some questions. I have a few things to do this afternoon, so I can't stick around for a long time. But I will answer a few questions about anything, I suppose. If you guys have any questions for me. And or you can I guess I could explain where that tweet even came from. It's kind of funny. I actually thought of that tweet on, I think it was like a Saturday night. I thought of it on a Saturday night, and I was working. So I didn't want to do it Saturday night, and then I didn't want to do it on Sunday because I try to avoid controversy posting on Sunday. Sometimes I'll do pictures, but I kind of avoid controversy posting. But then Monday morning, I dropped my kids off at school and then sent it. And I really didn't think it would make such a big deal to people. I knew it would probably be, I guess, above average, but I didn't know it would send off a firestorm of unhappiness over that tweet. But here we are, and I think it's absolutely true that as a political unit, as a group, people who are labeled under the label white Christian nationalists, it's absolutely the case that they are better on most moral issues and political issues than any other group, and most groups by far. So there are other groups that kind of trail behind closely. I think there's like Hispanic Protestants are very close to white evangelicals. Oftentimes they're actually considered white, so that's kind of confusing for the statistics. But generally speaking, they without them, our country would be in very, very bad shape. And yet they receive all the hate. Every single year, there are dozens of books and then dozens and dozens of articles that attack white evangelicals just relentlessly, in the worst possible way, even by and especially by people who also claim to be Christians. It's interesting that on the subtitles of these books are things like how they corrupted the gospel when you ask them what the gospel is. And it turns out that the critics of white evangelicals tend to think the gospel is about spreading LGBTQ plus rights and other things, and also woke racial theories. So it's interesting how like the corrupted gospel just happens to be what is fashionable for all the people at MSNBC and the regime. And that's the uncorrupted gospel. Whereas the gospel that is at least, far more consistent with the historic conception of what the gospel is, that's the corrupted gospel. But of course, it's all just it's just shameless rhetoric. It's the whole thing is just shameless rhetoric. When it comes down to when your audience is a kind of deeply and kind of neurotic, politically left-wing group that doesn't actually care about the theology itself, you can say anything you want and you're going to get praise and accolades and a slot on MSNBC. I mean, that's just what's That's what it's all about. Like in the end, it's not about pleasing, like the criticizing white evangelicals, criticizing Christian nationalists. It's really in the end not about actually. It, it's not about contributing to the good of the church. It's typically about presenting yourselves as um, these kind of religious folks who then can get along and have a seat at the table with the regime. And so it's pleasing the regime, and you get all the what is it, the gold star stickers on your score sheet because you attacked the true enemies of the regime. The true enemies of the regime, the most consistent enemies of the regime are the white evangelicals. Now everyone gets kind of butthurt because I use the racial. There's always it's the evangelicals, the Christians, it's the Christians themselves. Well, yeah, I mean true Christians generally will vote along these lines, but it's interesting that many groups that claim to be Christian actually vote the exact opposite. So you do wonder, well, if true Christians will vote along these lines of this, consistent with white evangelicals, well, that would mean that all these other people are not, and yet we're told they're highly religious. So it's strange. But as a group, of course, they are the most consistent. They are considered the enemy. That's why they are attacked. That's why they are attacked just relentlessly. And it's good to have a day where you say thank you. They're not perfect. Evangelicals are not perfect. I myself, I guess to the eyes of the world, I'd be an evangelical, though I'm not entirely sure that my theology squares with, whatever it would mean. But it's good to say these people have faced criticism and don't care, and they still vote. They still vote in grand numbers for the good guys. So it's good to have a day. I appreciate all the support, the outpouring of um, on Twitter. In fact, you guys reminded me a week ago when some of this stuff started buzzing. Oh, it's almost that Bulwark Day. You guys remind me of that, so I appreciate that and support. Things are changing. I think we can recognize that there's things that are kind of squirrely about evangelicals. We can recognize that they have their foreign policy is horrible or has been horrible. I think in the last 20 years, I consider myself a part of that group. I had a horrible foreign policy 20 years ago, so I understand. Um, and yeah, so they are not perfect theologically, politically. There's some delusional takes they have about Israel and other places, but other than that, they are, I think, deserve praise and support. So if you are an evangelical, thank you. I guess I am one in some way, so I'll thank myself. And also, we should just be happy that God has brought these people or had that they are true Americans, and they vote properly. All right, so let's do some questions after I just kind of rambled on for a little while. I got a bunch of Hinlows. Hinlow friend. Yeah, yeah. You like the chessboard? Yeah, that was specially made by Boniface Woodworking, I think. Not the other Boniface, but not Isker, but another Boniface. I don't see his stuff on Twitter anymore. I followed him, promoted him for a little while, but I don't see it anymore. So I don't know if he's still doing his work. What is a good first book for one to learn about the American founding? Okay. I think in terms of religion, so if you want to know what kind of the religious side of the American founding, I would read Mark David Hall's book. The title is a question, something like was America founded as a Christian nation? So I don't think that's it, but something like that. You'll find it, Mark Hall. Anything Mark Hall has written is good. He did come out with a book that he said that Christian nationalism is not a big deal, and I think I haven't read it. I'm sure it's good. But I think read that. And the other one is, yeah, it's something like the religion of the American founders. Uh, um, yeah, something along those lines. You'll find it. Well, there's too much going on here. Have you read George Washington Irving's bio? I have not. Should I? Washington Irving. All right. Talk about Doug Wilson say no. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I greatly appreciate Doug Wilson. I think that he has, in a way, cleared the way for a lot of us. So I think even if we disagree with him, we have to recognize that he was kind of trailblazer in many respects. in spirit and in attitude. And some of the ideas, at least that I don't agree with. So I'm probably theologically not in totally. I'm more classical Protestant, I'd say, than he is. I think he claims that he is that, and he is I guess for the most part. But there's areas where we disagree. Um, I haven't talked to him like in back channels at all. So I haven't actually watched the full interview. So I feel bad. In a way, I feel bad for the tweet yesterday because I actually didn't watch everything. But I do think there is that tension within some kind of like post mill circles, and I'm not saying not everyone post mills like this. There is that tension where you, if like you think so providentially as of things getting better, and there's a sort of a sense in which like revivalism and revival is going to undergird all of what we accomplish in the world. And so in that way, you kind of wait upon revivalism, and but it's framed such that, well, we can kind of escape the politics. So this is where I it's not that I don't think that like a revival would have, produce good political outcomes in the short and long run. Um, but that there's a sense in which I get the sense that revivalism is a way to replace politics, meaning that, well, yeah, once everyone's a Christian, then of course we can pass this law or that law, and there won't be much fuss about it. But my point is that in politics, you're always going to have struggle, you're always going to have disagreement, and you're always, if you have the power, you're always going to have to assert that your will in the political space, and not everyone's going to be happy about it, and it's always going to be like that. And so in politics, then, if we want, what this means then is that in places where Christians can kind of assert their will in politics, then they should do that, even if it's going to cause people to be unhappy about it. Now, when we do this, when you enact law, you do it for the common good. And so, like, even if you ban certain vices across the board in a state or in a locale or whatever, you're actually doing this for everyone's good. And so, in that sense, it's universal in that way. But nevertheless, if Christians have the possibility, they have the power, then they should enact law. And if there's disagreement, then they have to deal with it. You say tough. If it's like like things like abortion, we're very willing to do this. At least the people on the like most evangel like a I don't know, active political evangelicals are willing to have very high restrictions on abortion, and they really don't care so much that this will make other people mad. And my point is, why don't we do that for other things? Why don't we do that for other things that would bring about good in this world? So if you're willing to assert your will on one area that's good, why not on the other things as well? Now, another thing to notice is that if you're a minority of people can actually enact a lot of change in society. So very few people 5 years ago, 10 years ago, affirmed transgenderism in the way they do now, and yet they were able, as a small minority, to change things rapidly and significantly. To the point where you can like lose your job, to the point where the military now has the policy is essentially transgender affirming, and not only as an institution in terms of regulations, but actually this down to the soldier level, the soldier, Marine, Airman, they all have to essentially affirm in one way or another transgenderism in practice. So, sir, ma'am, that sort of thing, right? So that, even though that was a small little percentage of people who cared about that, I mean, we kind of all knew years ago where this was headed. I was active duty Army. This must have been must have been 2010, I believe. 2010. I was active duty Army. I was sitting in a room where, like, so before this was remember, Obama is the one who rescinded Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I don't remember if it was 2010 or 2011, but whatever it was around that period. And it wasn't just, oh, this is wrong, let's change it now. They had this sort of like listening dialogue thing going on. Some of you might have been in the military back then. They had this kind of listening dialogue thing, which was it was silly. But I had to sit down with like a couple dozen people to talk about the change. And I remember I made the prediction. I was like, well, you change this, and it's just the floodgates are open. We're going to have these very flamboyant, people within the military. It's just and most of the people in there thought I was crazy and kind of laughed at me for that. And I think I've been proven right, and I think it's only going to get worse. I will say though that I do think our United States military um, would pardon the language, but kick ass pretty much anywhere in the world. So I actually don't believe the sort of woke hype that the military is not effective. I think what's holding the military back is mainly recruitment numbers and money. But I think in terms of man-to-man killing force, I think it's superb. So I'll just say that. But why was I talking about that? Oh, but the point is that a small number of people in the transgender world just really um, took things over. So I think if we have that kind of mentality, then also we can think of a minority being very effective. And this is mainly because we have to admit, like the kind of squishy middle, which most people are kind of in this squishy middle bracket. They're easy to kind of like bring along. This sounds very elitist, but this is simply the case. Gay marriage was not very popular 10, 20 years ago. And yet it's forced upon every single state, and now a super majority of people affirm gay marriage. So it just happened. It's just true that the average person is kind of carried along. Unfortunately, this is the case, carried along with the spirit of the age. So the trick is, how do you, as a minority, as a Christian minority, find ways to in a way replace that spirit of the age, which is leading to degeneracy, and then lead it to righteousness. So getting back to the main point, or beginning back to like Doug Wilson, I don't want to. I don't think we should kind of wait upon a revival before we do political things. I don't think he would affirm that either. I'm sure he would not affirm that. I think we should think more politically, and less in terms of no, not less, but in addition to preaching the gospel and seeking conversion, also seeking political gains with prudence and wisdom as well. I think that it's kind of it might be a theological, political theory point as well, but there's a sense that, well, I think we should think of politics as, like, if you think of a civil ruler, he does care as the end or purpose of his policy, he should care for the eternal good of all people. So this is part of what I think Christian nationalism is that you'd have laws and custom that order people to the highest good. Um, so he has that as a purpose or end of policy. But in terms of enacting the policy in the world, he's less concerned about the regeneration of hearts in terms of the possibility of enacting it. So you can distinguish between the end of a policy and then the possibility of it being effective in the public sphere. So people who are nominally or culturally Christian can tolerate, or can affirm, not just tolerate, but affirm Christian laws. So if you're nominally Christian or culturally Christian, you could be brought into affirming, let's say, a Sabbath law, right? That is restricting certain commercial activities on Sundays. Even though they're not regenerate in heart, they can affirm that the goodness of, and they can assent to the truth of that law and obey it. So it'd be an effective law. Because a lot of people who are culturally and nominally Christian, by which I don't mean the Richard Dawkins sort. I mean the person who is culturally Christian from family and affirms things of the Christian faith. I mean, the thing that makes them not Christian is that they don't actually have faith in the heart, but they can affirm all sorts of Christian doctrines. If you ask them, is Christ king? They'd say yes, those sorts of things. So because they can assent to theological propositions, they can also assent to Christian laws at the same time. All that being said, is that a civil magistrate, a civil ruler, a Christian prince, whatever, they can look at the circumstances on the ground and they can say, okay, well, I don't know if anyone's regenerate, but you know what? If I do a law that's Sabbath law, these people would obey it. Like, this would work and it would be effective. And so he enacts it. He doesn't kind of take a poll. He doesn't like try to figure out, like a church minister does, to see if everyone actually has a credible faith or what have you. But he does say this will be effective. And in fact, and then in doing that, he has in mind the inner purpose of the policy, which is ordering people to eternal life. So I think there might be this kind of disagreement where I'm more. I think if you think more politically and in political ends, then you don't have to think so much about revivalism. And even if there is a sort of revival that is cultural and nominal, like that would be good as well to enact laws. So I don't know. I think it's just more complicated. And let's wait on revival. And we should think of politics as what can we accomplish on the ground. And this is actually really good. This is good news for us Protestants, and in the sense that we can affirm each other's mutual faith. So a Presbyterian, a Baptist, and you know, and even charismatic, all sorts of people can affirm each other's mutual faith despite our disagreements. And so we don't have to we don't have to we don't have to wait for everyone to be Presbyterian. We don't have to wait for everyone to be Baptist, or we don't wait for everyone to become Anglican. We can say, look, we are a Christian people. We have disagreements, but we can have even though we can't have kind of close spiritual fellowship in the institution of the church, we can still have a civil fellowship in the civil sphere that that still recognizes that we all are seeking after this highest thing, and we have this highest thing in Christ together, despite our disagreements. And this is just an important point of Protestantism, that you can accomplish that. Whereas in Roman Catholicism is a little harder, because you see the visible hierarchy as like the church, and if you're not in communion with that hierarchy, then you're not in the true church. Whereas, this is one reason why Protestantism, this is one reason why religious liberty can be seen as something that flowed out of Protestantism, and that's because Protestants began to say, "Hey, we can actually get along. We can do this thing called civil society together without harming or attacking one another." And so we can grant religious liberty. So, and this is why I think when we talk about religious liberty, we should think of religious liberty within the bounds of a Protestant order, or at least at most a Christian order. I think Roman Catholics have shifted oddly. They've developed from their older position of kind of being opposed to religious liberty to now claiming to be the ones who first discovered it. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but that there's something about Roman Catholics where they always have to find that everything good ultimately somehow came from them and the Roman Catholic Church. But anyway, they can be brought in very well into this society, because they no longer, I guess most of them, take seriously the idea that a pope can excommunicate a civil ruler and order the fellow Roman Catholics to no longer obey the laws or whatever. They don't take that seriously anymore. So really, Roman Catholics are no threat to a Protestant order anymore. But anyway, so the point is, religious liberty should be bounded within Protestantism, and because it stems from Protestantism, it is undergirded by Protestantism, and which means you can have pan-Protestant political order that is ordered to the good in this world. So anyway, I'm kind of went on a rabbit trail there. I don't know if I might have missed some questions. I'd love to have a conversation with Doug about this. I haven't talked to him in a while, but I I think that there could be a lot of I don't know. This is the difficulty, is that you don't want to get into a purity spiral in a movement. I mean, we've seen this over and over in the Christian right. There's some people like who are on the right I'm willing to jab at and like distance from, not distance, but attack, or whatever. But for the most part, if you're going to be successful in bringing some good in this world, you can't just go into this purity spiral and have these silly disputes online. And you have to learn from one another. And so for Doug Wilson, I mean, practically in the eyes of the world, we're the same people. There's like insane people on Twitter who have, this one woman has like 250,000 followers on Twitter, and she always groups me and then William Wolf and Doug Wilson together, and we're basically the same thing in the eyes of the regime anyway. So why, why? But at the same time, we should maintain the ability to have disagreement, and because that's good. I mean, it's good to have disagreement and friendly disagreement. But again, also I think Doug Wilson deserves our respect, because again, as I said earlier, he pioneered a lot of these things. And even if you disagree with him on things, he deserves respect. And of course, you can disagree with him, but I would just suggest that it's done respectfully. I think I've done that. Maybe I guess you could disagree. Um, yeah, and of course he published the book. So great. Yeah. So America was founded on a Reformed Protestantism. I don't know if it was Reformed, but it was certainly a Protestant basis. It was formed by Protestantism or in Protestantism. Even people who were, I mean, Daryl Hart has a good spiritual biography of Benjamin Franklin, and in there he says Ben Franklin, despite being probably like one of the closer founders to deism, I don't think it's accurate to call many founders deism or deist, even Thomas Jefferson. But he does, Daryl Hart does say that Benjamin Franklin is clearly a cultural Protestant, and he's a cultural Anglo Protestant, to the extent that the German Protestants are moving into Pennsylvania, and Benjamin Franklin's losing his mind. He's like, "You people are not." You don't have a culture of liberty. You're German, and so he tries to bring the Germans, essentially anglicize the Germans, and even actually, I'm not going to say it worked, but the Germans today, the German German immigrants from the 19th century today that are Protestant are actually like politically solid. So I don't know if it worked or maybe we just all learned to get along. But where was I? Oh yeah, so certainly there was a cultural Protestantism. This is where when people say, "Oh, it was an experiment founded on like maximal liberty for any and all," but there was deep concern at the time of the founding, after the founding for several months, about maintaining a sort of Anglo Protestantism, and this actually was kind of accomplished with assimilation of the German Protestants into kind of this. I mean, some people, what's his name, Eric? It'll come to me, but some people think that there was actually like a solid like ethnogenesis that occurred that was in the process of occurring from the founding up until like 1820, 1830s, and that's when a lot of mainly Roman Catholic immigration came in, and that's when you have like the Know Nothing movement and responding to that. And one of the fears was actually Sabbath keeping because it was a very much of an Anglo Protestant thing to keep Sabbath, whereas it was not for the Irish and the German Roman Catholics. At least that was the claim. I don't know. I never talked to a 19th century Irish Catholic, but that was the claim. At least most Irish Catholics don't today. But there was that was one of the fears. But the point being, what I was trying to say is that there was a sense in which it wasn't open for all. There was an American way of life. There was a sort of American ethne. There was a people that had a way of life that, of course, was rooted in European, but particularly kind of British backgrounds, but still uniquely American. And this is why you find distinctions. You find people recognizing differences between like America and the English at the time. But certainly, yeah, there was a sense that these people who come in need to conform to the dominant ethnicity, which was essentially Anglo-Protestantism. So there was in one sense there was a particularity in the early American Republic. There was a sense of particularity. At the same time, there was a sense of openness, meaning that people could come from non-British sources and conform into the American ethne. So it wasn't like this, oh, you're not French, you're out, or it wasn't like you don't have the blood. You can actually be brought into the American ethne, and all that. There was a process of that breaking down over time, but apart from that, I mean, there was a sense in which there was the dominant view of America in the late 18th and the 19th century into the early 20th century up into World War II, and even after World War II, everyone knew this was a Christian country. I mean, the constitutional right or the constitutional amendments in 1650s, or no, in the 1850s and 1860s, it wasn't, hey, we're not a Christian country, we need to make ourselves a Christian country. No, it was that we are a Christian people. Why is it not reflected in our constituting documents? Why is it not in the preamble of the Constitution? So you have people like Reformed Protestants like A. Hodge asserting that very point, which is why don't we actually be why doesn't the the truth about society, our American society, why is not reflected within the Constitution? So, some Roman Catholics get a soft door update from time to time. I actually, you know, I do not like the integralist and the neocon Roman Catholics, but there are outstanding Roman Catholics out there. So I'm not a fan of like the Amari integralism, because I think it's just internationalism, just but it's basically European socialism. And I'm not a fan of the neocon Roman Catholics, because they're just neoconservatives and they send us to war. And I'll just leave it at that. How do you address existing establishment clause jurisprudence? Yeah, that's an excellent question for Time and Klein, but I will say that yeah, I mean, we should just go back to before the incorporation doctrine. And so basically what happened is the 14th Amendment, decades after it was interpreted, applied the Establishment Clause to the states. So like I like to say, if you read the First Amendment, the first word is Congress, which means the original intent of, and the only, I mean, not only the intent, but in itself, the only effect of it is to constrain the federal government. It's to constrain Congress. And so that means it would not apply to the states. That's why for decades after, you have these quasi-establishments and churches and other things. But yeah, then the incorporation doctrine was expanded, and then in the Warren Court in the post-World War II era, then began to, as you guys know, the kind of the general story, applying the First Amendment to the states and then to the counties and then to local school districts. There's a case, I don't remember the case exactly, but the case is a group of students wanted to do a prayer before a high school football game in the stadium, and that was shut down because that was considered an establishment of religion. So it's gone all the way, not just at the state level, not even at like the county level, but even down to the school level as well. So all that needs to go back and go back to the states as well. Now, for some states, that could be bad for some people. That's just the case, but in other states, it would be good, very good. Janet Mefford. Yeah, great question here. So, peoples who are not sound Christians, or maybe not even Christians, like Trump, with faulty positions. Yeah, I mean, I wrote an essay actually several years ago defending voting for Trump, and it's at Mere Orthodoxy of all places. You can find it. I forget what it's called. But I think it was a consequentialist theory of voting or something like that. But yeah, I think that we should think of voting as actually kind of consequentialist, in the sense that we're voting for people who we think are going to bring the best possible outcomes in the situation. So that character matters in that, beliefs matter in that, like, religion matters in that, to the extent that those things would affect policy. I think Trump has proven, despite, I mean, I was disappointed with him, like many on the right were, for his 4 years in office. But at the same time, he was certainly better than Hillary, and he would be better than Biden. So I get that might be simplistic. I know people want to take a more kind of absolutist position. My position is that in the end, what are you voting for? You're voting for a person who's going to produce good political outcomes. And I think voting for Trump in this round is going to produce better political outcomes than one that you get from Biden, and also probably better than you get from most other people on available. So that won't. So that's basically my position. I think it is a moral case, but I just don't think there is. I don't think there's a sort of litmus test that, okay, if they don't pass these, then you can't vote for them. Especially if Trump is president, then, like on the abortion issue, I mean, he, as president, the best he can do is elect Supreme Court justices or nominate, and he did very well in that regard. So Hope that answers your question. What are your predictions for the election? I don't want to. I don't want to predict anything for the election. I don't want to do that. I don't know. I honestly don't follow it close enough. I have other things I'm doing, so I don't know where the poll numbers I see is that Trump is ahead. It all I think it all comes down to turnout and also like the white working class, if they can be energized to vote like they did in 2016. If that's the case, then I think Trump can win. But it's a matter of, is he going to get the sort of energy out of that those people in Wisconsin and Michigan and Minnesota, so they can actually win. Yeah, and also like get out the vote can't like voting can't like do what the left does, not harvesting ballots or whatever, but within the extent of the law, they should try to maximize the voter turnout. Seem what we need to do. Okay. What did I miss? I miss anything from you guys? Yeah, so this is a good point. So liberal Christians have, I can't read it now. Liberal Christians have no problem being assertive in politics. Conservative individualists refuse because of certain laws is totalitarian. Yeah, I think Orrin McIntyre makes this point, and I think he got it from someone else, which is that the people who care the most win. The people who care the most always are the ones who win. Now, conservatives are interesting because they do care a lot, but they care by going to like listening to sermons that agree with their politics. They turn on talk radio. I mean, talk radio is a conservative domain. They watch Fox News. They get all energized. And they just go, all, "Arr." But they don't run for the local school board. They don't get involved in local politics. They don't become teachers. They don't become experts in public administration. They simply don't do that sort of work. And a lot of times they do actually very good work in what they're doing, and they care, but they don't care enough to get the job. They don't care enough to go to the streets. If I mean, it's actually it's incredible that you could have a completely justified shooting of a criminal, and liberals and the left would just storm the streets, even though everyone knows it was justified. They would storm because they in a way care more. I mean, there might be some other things going on there, but they care more, and so they will assert themselves more. The other thing about the left is they're willing to literally lie, cheat, and steal. I know people don't like that, but like literally the left they're not principled. They put up this sort of moral preening. They have a moral show that they put up, and they think they care for the little guy. In the end, they're willing to lie and cheat and steal. And then when they're caught in it, no one cares. Like remember the laptop story of Hunter Biden's laptop and about like what was it, like a few hundred old like security officials and bureaucrats signed a document saying this has Russia and Putin all over it. I mean, most of them probably one didn't know or they lied. A lot of them probably actually did know because they still have buddies in the FBI, but they lied and nothing happened to them. The left didn't cancel them. A lot of these guys are still commentators on CNN and MSNBC, and there they are. The left doesn't do it. In that sense, the left is just utterly unprincipled. But the conservatives are hyper principled. In fact, this is why, like Samuel Francis would say, that they're beautiful losers. The principles of their action is to literally to lose, but do it in this sort of beautiful way. So they're losers by principle, and so. But I'm talking more about the conservative elites. But what someone just like yesterday, I think it was Lomez or whatever his name is on Twitter, posted that there's a small town that now is doing like a small town, like southern town that's now doing drag shows. They're now doing drag shows. Well, why is that? I mean, you have a small town that's probably voted 60-70% conservative or Trump. The 30% cares more. So they take all the positions in the town and the school board and the this and that. And now they're having a sanctioned event, city council sanctioned event for drag queen story hour for kids. Now, Will conservatives show up and protest? Maybe some. Maybe in this case they will. I don't know. Um, but in most cases that has actually not happened. Or maybe there's like one or two or three people who show up, and a lot of times those are kind of nutty people who just show up to everything. But there just isn't that sort of that need to get out into the public and assert in protest. Conservatives don't like do that. They like to do it. They like order. They like process. I mean, this is one reason why it's so pleasant to live in a conservative area, because they don't commit crimes. They're pleasant. They're decent. They mow their lawn. They like order. They like to grill. They like their Sunday football, and everyone is happy. But in the end, it's it's the people who care the most who are going to win. And I don't know how to change that. I don't know how to change that. It's challenging. Can you make the? I can't see it. My little thing. He's not good. Oh, okay, okay, yeah. So I'm teaching a class to high school kids. It's on American government. I will have another section of it in the fall and then the spring of 25. And I take a very institutional approach. I just walk through the Constitution. I try not to make it ideological or go off on tangents. It's mainly straightforward stuff. Because most high schoolers, you should teach them the basics instead of having these lectures. I mean, they go, these guys don't, but the people go to high schools, they don't learn what they need to learn. They just hear the rant from their, crazy blue-haired teacher. But for me, it's just, I just want to teach them the basics of the facts, and have them work from there. So when they get to college and other places. Um, oh yeah, the reading list. It's mainly like primary source stuff. So it's almost entirely primary source. I don't know how to what sort of medium to use to make it public. So I guess I could do that. I don't know. I don't know. Send me a Facebook message or a Twitter DM. Maybe I'll remember to do that. Yeah, one of the things I've realized in the last like year or so, and it's funny, I didn't actually think a lot about this when I was writing the book, but evangelicals and reform folks and all that, they are really into eschatology. And I'm just not just talking about like the signs of the times sort of people. I'm talking about even like post mill. Everything is framed in terms of eschatology. And I feel kind of like at a place in that conversation, because very little of my thinking actually is applies these typical eschatological positions. I mean, to listen like post mill people talk about, like, there's, you go up and there's go down and you go up, but it trends all the way up. It always trends up. And I guess that what that means, I guess, is it provides hope for people who are doing things in troubled times. So if you're trying to build now and you're trying to do good now, you can see yourself as kind of on that trend line going up. So I get that, why people talk about that. But if I'm going to talk about politics as politics, I'm not really going to talk much about eschatology. I'm going to talk about the how do I get that off the screen? Anyway, I'm going to talk about the nature of man, like what is man. And so if you've listened to podcasts that I've talked about this, or if you've read the book, you'll know I don't talk about eschatology except for maybe in the end. That's mainly the question of, okay, what sort of being is man? Man's a social being. Well, what sort of social being is man? Well, he's not like a bear. He's not like bees. He's individual. He's an individual, but also needs a group. He's also kind of he's a bounded person, like bounded in a place with others, and so you just work from there to build what your politics is and what it should do. Now, I do think eschatology matters in the terms of the destination of man. So if the destination of man is eternal life, or some sort of eternal state, then that should figure into politics, because if we know the means to attain that eternal state, then that should factor into how we do politics, what sort of laws we have, where we're ordering the society to. So that matters in eschatology in terms of the eschaton, but less in terms of like, is it amill, post mill, dispensational? I mean, people are like talking about pessimism or optimism. I For me, it's like, well, we should act according to our nature. Like, it could be that America is going downhill, and and in my lifetime, everything's gonna be bad, and my kids' lifetime's gonna be bad. But if we're acting in dignity as human beings and we're seeking the good in the world, even if we fail, we're still acting in dignity. We didn't just sort of cower under a rock or become slaves or something like that. We actually just asserted ourselves and ultimately kind of lost. I mean, that's the tragic nature. This is kind of like my tragic. I don't say I'm pessimistic or optimistic on Mill. I say I'm like a tragic on Mill, meaning that there's a sort of the tragedy of life is that you kind of assert your sense of what's good in the world, and you try to see it enacted, but it's not always clear what that's doing in the grand scheme of things. But I post Mill, I understand how would they have this sort of hope. Maybe I'm too like existential. I wonder if I'm too influenced by that sort of existential thought, where it's like you just have to assume you just have to assume your dignity, and no matter what happens in the end, you still just have to continue on and fight for what's good. But the point, what I'm trying to say is that in the end, politics is a matter of ordering a human society. And so you have to understand what the human is, you have to understand what a human society is, and then you have to see how politics relates to that, like how, yeah, in light of what man is. So, yeah, and you say so. Would you say a lack of force or violence in response to the leftist evil is a sign of our moral decay? Um, I mean, we are Americans, so we do believe that there is a time for revolution. The problem with most revolutions is they usually fail, and then if they succeed, the politics after usually fail. And so it's not always um it's rarely prudent to become to start a violent revolution. Another thing with violence is that once you do it, it spirals. So it's a very kind of tricky. It's a tricky subject. Um, the problem is that we don't live in utter anarchy, and so there does seem to just still be a political solution to the left. It just requires a sort of will to make it happen. I don't know if that's a satisfying question. I mean, the problem with violence is it just has to be done with extreme care, because yeah, one, revolutions often don't work, or they are worse in the long run. Um, and if you just do sort of violence on the local, like individual level, then that just spirals out of control. Also, if you're under authority of a magistrate that's charged with kind of doing the violence, you're violating that. You're violating your in a way you're packed with the magistrate. So yeah, and that's a complex subject. But yeah, I don't like. In fact, like if I had to take out a chapter in the book, it would be to take out the revolution chapter. Not because I don't like it, not because but if I had to like reduce pages, I'd take that out because it's really not the it's not essential to the argument of Christian nationalism. But I did want to make the case and answer questions related to it, which I did, and freaks everyone out, which I don't care that it freaks people out. But it's not something that I'm not calling for like a revolution. But I'm not a beautiful loser. I'm a tragic all mill. Okay, thank you. That's good. Yeah, a tragic. It's just this sense that you don't know if it's like what you're doing in the moment, where it's gonna actually go in time. Like you can be faithful in time that has eternal rewards and consequences. but it's never kind of clear what you're doing at the moment, where it's going to lead in the long run. And so you still want to be prudent. You still want to seek the good the best you can. But yeah, you still have a sense of the kind of tragic nature that you could produce. Even if you accomplish this great republic, it's fragile. It can eventually fall. It probably eventually will fall. But you just do the best you can to maintain the good. So whereas, like, I don't know what dispensationalists would think, but the post mill is they wouldn't think that way. I think. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. This is yeah. That's a good point. Um, yeah, yeah. You don't have any institutional backing. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean, one of the remarkable things about the founding era is that they were able to not only win the war, but also then establish a political system. I mean, it wasn't, the hiccup of the Confederation, but then the Articles of Confederation, but then it actually produced the founding document we have now, the U.S. Constitution. Pretty remarkable, and which means there was enough unity at the time, cultural unity, linguistic and demographic unity, and intellectual unity to produce that sort of document. I mean, everyone there respected Christianity itself, and everyone there respected people like John Locke. Everyone there respected, um, they respected Montesquieu. Everyone's kind of pulling from these authorities, either ancient or to their case modern. And among these respected authorities to produce this document, I don't know if I mean, we just couldn't do that today. Even among the right, I mean, the right would be everything from like Evelo would be thrown out to I don't know, on my side, enthusiasts, and it would just be an utter mess. Um, which means, and I mean, I don't know what the solution is. That we just got to fight to try to maintain some kind of unity. But can you can you describe how you're thinking of the place of the pastor in the CN project? Yeah. So I mean, in my view, the main role of the pastor is to administer word and sacrament, and and that's principally for the good of the soul and eternal life. So that's they speak to the soul, they speak to you, and in a way are as citizens of heaven, in a way someone who's bound to go somewhere when you die. So I think that's the principal role, and or another way, like the worship of God, salvation of souls. Then they can speak. They should speak to moral and ethical issues that even those that pertain to politics. And I think that would be wise for Christian rulers to receive advice from. They can request advice from churches to on certain matters, which has happened in the past. So I think that would be wise, and the church can then respond with their moral judgment on some issue. But ordinarily, in terms of politics, it should not be this. It should not be at this top, like church down to state. They should be in a way distinguished, and that our political activity should be outside of the church and as Christians, outside the church as institutions, outside. In other words, our political activity should be outside the kind of headship or the direction of the pastor in the instituted church. It's not a yeah the church is not a social movement association. It's not the hub from by which all politics happen. But as a Christian, you can then organize with other Christians to enact Christian policies. Now, I think there is an advisory role. The one way I think of it, as I've mentioned, that they're kind of like chaplains. So, a chaplain in the military is on special staff. Is on the special staff for commanders, so battalion, brigade, division, corps, all the way up. But he's not in the chain of command. So, like a chaplain is someone who's special staff, which means he has a direct line to the commander, but he's not in the line of the chain of command. A brigade commander commands battalion commanders. There's no sort of in between, as if here, chaplain, here's the order. to go tell the battalion commander. That's not it. So the chaplain then, or the pastor as a sort of chaplain figure in a Christian movement can then advise, can then, but doesn't give the orders, doesn't take the orders, doesn't carry the orders. And if let's say a pastor is involved in a movement and they're doing that sort of thing, then they're not acting, to my mind, they're not acting as pastors, they're acting as members of a movement. So yeah, just like if, yeah, you can be two different things. So like a pastor is also a father, a pastor is a pastor, and then he can also be a political leader, but not as pastor. So that's, I don't know if that's very clear. That's kind of contrary to a lot of evangelical and post-mill thinking. I just think that that pastors are usually ill-equipped to be good leaders, in terms of political leaders. Not all the time. I mean, movement leaders. There are exceptions to this. Uh, so like I think Dusty Devers, for example, I think he's an assembly. I forget what he is over there, but what the title is. But when he's in the chambers trying to legislate, he's not a pastor. He's a member of the legislature. So you have to distinguish. I mean, sometimes he stands up and sounds like he's preaching, but he's just a member of the legislature. So he's acting in that capacity as a legislature. Whereas when he's in the pulpit at his church, he's acting as pastor, and that's a distinction of roles. And so that's fine. But I just think ordinarily you don't want a pastor as pastor leading these things, for several reasons. And if they do write a book on politics, like take Samuel Rutherford's Lex Rex. I mean, there's some Bible in there, but a lot of it's just kind of political theory. And he's writing that as a political theorist, not as a theologian pastor. I mean, there are aspects of that, of theologian in there. But he was writing as a political theorist and not as a theologian. At least, so that's I know that's kind of controversial. People don't agree with all that, but that's my view. I would prefer that pastors spend more time preaching the gospel and also duties of like ethical life, rather than let's do another political sermon that everyone wants to hear. So I don't know. I go back and forth because I think there is a role of political association among evangelical pastors. This is one reason why I think Hispanics, when they convert to Protestantism, tend to become conservatives, because now they're within this evangelical orbit and they tend to kind of conform through that socialization into being more conservative. Whereas if they remain Roman Catholic, to my knowledge, they typically then will vote for Democrats. So there is that sense in which the evangelical society shapes and socializes into good politics. Yeah, anyway, keep going. Do I see the influence of Groypers on substantially positive, exposing the post-war consensus? I actually don't follow a lot of Groypers. I don't counter signal people like Nicholas Fuentes. I've never talked to him. Don't really watch him very often. Yeah, from like my impression, I don't want to mischaracterize everyone there, because I don't actually know enough. But I do see them as people who could kind of come to our side as Christian nationalists, especially if they're Protestant. I mean, I think Nick Fuentes has claimed Christian nationalism. I don't know. But if they are Protestant, then they can see that, look, we're kind of assertive Christian politics and believe the sort of things, some of the things that they would believe. All right, Devers is a state senator. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't know if he was an assemblyman or a state senator. So thanks for that. Yeah, so this is a big problem with dispensationalism, and it's odd that it's been one of those crazy things. Like, regardless of, I'm not going to get into like the question. I'm not going to get into Israel so much, but it is kind of strange that the same people who would freak out over police abuse or what alleges police abuse, and and want us to be kind of what is it? Peace, love, spare change sort of Christians in this world. All of a sudden, they want to bomb the hell out of Palestinians. It's like, and excuse after excuse. What is it, like 40,000, 35, 40,000 Palestinians have died. Most newspapers reporting that it's the majority children and women and children that are dying. I know this situation is very complex. I'm not going to make my judgment on who's right or who's wrong and all that, but it is very strange to me that I can be criticized for things, and all like the Christian right can be criticized for mean tweets and saying things and dignity this and oh, you said MS-13 people are animals, that's violating their dignity. Like I saw that someone freaked out. Donald Trump did that again, where he called some murderer a dog or like something like that, or an animal. And there was another freak out session. Like everyone freaked out again. Uh, and here we are, that those same people who freak out don't seem to care that Palestine is being leveled by Israeli weapons and tens of thousands of people. And this is like Wall Street Journal reporting 35, 40,000 deaths. So it's all very strange. I mean, it's like, yeah. And then you get back to like Jewish nationalism. So like you could, like Israel, the only country that Israel can be an ethno state. It can be ethno nationalist. It can be explicitly Jewish. That's celebrated. That's fine. But if anyone else wants to have some sense of like unity along particular lines, they lose their minds. So it's okay to do it for Israel, but not okay for anywhere else. It's a double standard. I don't understand why people do this. Um, I mean, they're mentally captured. It's very weird. There's kind of a theory I have, like a projection where you project upon people or groups what you wish you could be in the world. So sometimes I think that like like left wing white people view black people in this way. So a lot of times black people can, like when they can be very confident in like their publicly asserting their rights or some injustice. Like we've seen that many times. They can very like stand up and say no more police violence or this and that. So they have this high confidence demeanor, which is respectable. But then the white liberals don't have that confidence. So they live vicariously through that. So they actually don't accomplish anything themselves. They don't have confidence in themselves. They sort of acquire that by supporting the minorities essentially. And I tend to think that it's natural for us to want our nation to be great. It's natural for us to want our nation to be people to be happy, that there's solidarity, that when you have a kid born into this world, you want that kid to enjoy the sort of life you have or better. And that involves socializing them into a way of life that you received from your ancestors. People generally want that. But if you're too afraid in yourself to try to bring that about in your place or among your people, you will be happy to see it realized through some other people. And so I wonder if there's a psychological thing, like a sort of projection where these dispensationalists then want to project their actual desires for themselves and have that fulfilled in the other. So basically, have the other is the means by which you fulfill your desires for yourself. That's my theory anyway. I think it explains a lot, and it's got a certain like 19th century philosophical view going on. But so yeah, again, it's like you have desires, you have needs as a human being, but then you will have those satisfied as you sort of observe and gaze at the other person doing it vicariously. Or yeah, you're doing it vicariously with them. So that's my theory. I don't know if it's true or not, but there you go. Yeah, I mean that's my theory. I mean, that's my theory. There's a strange willingness, and this is just for in the West generally. There's a strange willingness for people to be very unconfident and actually despise their selves and their people, their ancestry, and yet celebrate, praise, prop up, defend the high confidence of a group of the other. And I think there's something psychological about that. They get some sort of vicarious satisfaction from the observation, and yeah, I think it explains a lot. Okay, well, I got about 600 people viewing. That's kind of nice. Thank you very much. I don't know if I've said anything that'll cancel me. What cancel me from what? I don't know. Let me just. I got to get some stuff done outside. Looks like it might rain a little bit. Yeah. Um, So, but yeah, thanks for listening. So I do have this will be on YouTube. I'm going to start doing YouTube more. I have the podcast I've been trying to do, and got the. So if you want to support me in those ways, please check those out. And what are your thoughts on Russell? I don't. I did meet him once, but I don't know much about him. So ethnic ethnic simping. That's interesting. Okay. All right. Well, you guys have a great day. Thank you for the support of the Lone Bulwark Day and all that. You guys are great. So signing off. Hopefully I could do these things more in the future. Joe Rogan win. That would be great.